And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen.
My husband and my affair partner teamed up together and ruined my life. I know I did wrong by cheating on my husband, and I take accountability for it. I wish I could rewrite all the wrongs. I regret every bit of it now. I was deceived and also dumped. My affair partner, whom I trusted so much, decided to make my life a living hell. Now I'm currently served with divorce papers and left with nothing. Hi guys, my name is Mirabelle and I am a 27-year-old entrepreneur. I owned a store where I sewed clothes and sold them. I had always dreamt of being independent and doing what I love. I have passion for my job and I design most of my outfits. I also have people working for me at my workshop, and I'm married to a software engineer, Frederick. He is 27 years old. My husband and I have been married for 5 years now. We have known each other since college. We started off as friends when we were in school. I met Frederick at one of the annual school events that year. We started off like friends. It was a mutual feeling for me, but for Frederick, he was more interested in getting to know me more. We eventually started dating and went out together. We studied together during exam periods and did a lot of things together in school. As high school lovers, we went to school parties together, concerts, and we had fun. While we were in school, Frederick was a responsible guy. He was very careful anytime we went to those parties. And that was one of the things I loved about him. He is so gentle and kind-hearted. Those that knew him in school loved him because of how coordinated he was, and he took his studies seriously. We had a big social circle among my friends. Some of them had boyfriends and girlfriends. Frederick and I were an extension. We all hung out together and, most importantly, studied our books. 1 year later, we all graduated from college. Frederick and I then decided to move to Virginia, where our family was based. From there, he started introducing me to his family and all his friends. I was invited a couple of times to his home to have dinner with his family. It was a family of 4, Frederick's parents and his sister. It happened that Frederick's mom and I shared the same name. We also had a lot in common. Frederick's family were very welcoming. I got to know more about each and every one of them. Being the only sibling that Frederick had, he was very protective of his sister Leah. Frederick never jokes about anything that has to do with Leah. Leah was also kind-hearted just like Frederick. Their mom Gladys was also nice to me. She treated me like her second daughter. She didn't give me any reason to complain about anything. She always made sure I was very comfortable anytime I came around. Frederick's dad also was not an exception. They all treated me like I have known them for a long time. I also introduced Frederick to my family. They loved Frederick as well. I am from a family of 4. I have one sibling just like Frederick. I have a brother and his name is Jason. I love Jason a lot because he's more than a brother to me. We shared everything together and made memories. We were like besties. Everything really moved fast between me and Frederick. Both our families met on several occasions for dinner dates. We were like the perfect match. Our families were also in support of us coming together. I felt happy because I have found someone that loved me unconditionally. Before I met Frederick, I was unlucky with dates. Most of the guys that I had met only came to play around. But Frederick was different. I loved how he noticed every little detail about me. I was very happy to be Frederick's girlfriend. After a few months of graduation from college, Frederick then proposed to me to be his wife, which I accepted wholeheartedly because I loved him so much. Our families made arrangements for the wedding. They handled everything and did what was supposed to be done. I was happy that our families came through for us. The day of the wedding came and we tied the knot together. It was attended by both families and friends. It was a simple wedding. Everything went well and there was no drama of any kind. The wedding came to an end and everyone returned back to their respective destination. Frederick and I moved into our new house a few miles away from our parents. We started a new life as a newly married couple. I was happy to do life with Frederick. Few months of our marriage was blissful. We continued all what we did when we were single. We went out together and also attended a lot of family gatherings. Frederick got a job and he worked to fend for us. Not long after he got a job, I decided to chase my dreams and I opened a clothing store. I have always had a passion for sewing clothes and designing my own outfits. My store was moving really fast and everything went well. I get a lot of orders every week. I couldn't do the job myself because the workload was overwhelming, so I decided to employ some staff to help me out in the store. I also employed some staff that could also sew and design men's outfits. Not long after, my store was now a unisex store. My husband also helped me in putting things in order in my store. He also helped me with the marketing strategy and gave me a lot of exposure. What started like a small business grew into a full-blown one. I made outfits for my husband and his colleagues at work. I also made some for my family and even Federic's. Everyone supported my business in the little way they could. A few months after I opened my store, one of my college friends, Diana, was getting married. I was very happy, and what even made me happy the most was that she gave me the contract to make the outfit for her bridal train. It was a huge contract, and so I dedicated a lot of time to it, and all the girls that were on the bridal train looked beautiful, and they also loved their outfits. Some of them even patronized me after the event was over. My husband didn't stop helping me to get more audience for me. Frederick was very supportive, and he took his time to make sure I was very comfortable while doing my job. Yes, guys, Frederick was working at his own workplace. He is a software engineer. His work didn't take much of his time, so he always comes back early from work. Sometimes I was the one that often stayed out late at night because of the kind of orders I do get. I have to meet up with them and also make sure that my customers are satisfied. And most times, Frederick was the one that did make the meals we ate and also took care of things at home. Sometimes, when I didn't get back home early, my husband would call to make sure I was okay, and waited for me to get back so we could go to bed together. There were times I went out of town to do work, and I stayed for a week or more. My husband never complained because he knew about the nature of my job. One day while I was at my place of work, my husband called me that I should come back early so we could have dinner at home. I told him that I would try to close up early, which he agreed, and we ended the call. That day, I planned everything and promised not to disappoint him. Unfortunately, when I was about closing the store, a customer walked in and said he wanted to have a shirt designed. It was an unfamiliar face, yet looked so handsome. I hurriedly declined because I didn't want to disappoint my husband, but he was persistent and pleaded with me to help him out because he was going to attend an event the next day. Our dinner was to start at 8 p.m., and he came around 7 p.m. I agreed because I had about an hour before the dinner date. As at the time he came, all my staff had already closed from work. I dismissed them early so they could rest that day. I reopened the store and ushered him in. I watched him while he walked around the whole place. He looked pleased with what he saw and commended my efforts. A few minutes later, he walked up to me and told me the type of style he wanted. I took out the fabric and started working on it. We talked about a few things before we introduced ourselves. He introduced himself as Derek, and he stretched his hands for a handshake. We shook hands, and I also introduced myself as Gladys. He went further and said that I had a beautiful place. I was happy about the compliment, and I thanked Derek. Derek told me about the work he was doing and how he recently moved to our town because of work. While I was working on his clothes, he kept on talking about a lot of things. He talked to me like we have known each other for years. Meanwhile, Derek and I were just meeting for the first time. At some point, I didn't pay attention to him because I got tired. He was engrossed in the conversation. I kept looking at the time all through to see if I could get home on time to meet my husband. But I was stocked up with the work. I tried calling Frederick to apologize ahead of time, but his lines were not reachable. At that point, I couldn't stop what I was doing, and I didn't want to disappoint Derek because I had started working on the fabric already. He was a first-time customer, and so I didn't want to give him any reasons to complain. 2 hours later, I was done with the work. I gave it to Derek, but he insisted on giving it a try there, in case of any adjustment. I showed him a room where he could change. He entered the room, and I hurriedly packed up my things, ready to leave. A few minutes later, he came out. I was very happy about the dress, and also complimented my handwork. Honestly speaking, guys, he looked smart in that dress. He went back and changed into the normal clothes he came in with. I gave him my account details, and he wired the money plus an extra pay for taking my time. Derek offered to take me home, but I refused and told him I could manage. Before he left, Derek gave me his private card and told me to call him if I needed anything. I was hesitant at first, but I collected it. He also promised to come around after he got back from the event he wanted to attend, and he drove away. I was very happy because I delivered what he ordered and even gave me an extra tip. I checked my phone to see what time it was, and guess what, guys? It was 10 p.m. I was so shocked. I felt really bad because Frederick had taken time to prepare dinner for the both of us. I stood for a while before I was able to get a cab. While I was on my way home, I kept trying my husband's lines, but still not reachable. I kept on praying that he won't be angry with me for not keeping my promise. I got to my destination and I paid the cabman. I headed to the door and knocked. I knocked for a while, but no response. So I used my spare key and opened the door. I opened the door and met my husband deeply asleep. He must have waited for me, I thought to myself. I proceeded to the dining table and I saw that Frederick had prepared different meals for us to eat. I couldn't wake him up, and so I went to change into my nightwear. I was sad, guys. The next morning, I apologized to him and promised to make it up to him. From the look on his face, I knew that he was very angry about it, but chose to let it slide. I quickly went and prepared for him that day. I made breakfast for us, and we headed out to our place of work. I got to my store and saw that my staff had already started working. I was very pleased with them. They were very hardworking and didn't give me any reason to complain about anything. A few weeks later, Derek showed up to my store again. He told me how everyone complimented on the dress I made for him. From there, Derek and I became close. He often came to my store to have his clothes done or to keep me company. We hung out a couple of times together outside my store, from coffee dates to movie nights. We kept our personal life private, or should I say, I kept my relationship status private from Derek. He never asked if I was single or not. At that point, I was just having fun and didn't see the need to tell him. But Derek told me that he just got out of a broken relationship at that time. I felt bad for him because he was such a handsome guy that shouldn't be heartbroken by any lady. So guys, I didn't tell Derek that I was married. We kept on going out together. I did it in such a way that none of my staff knew what was going on between us. We kept on meeting at secret places to hang out together. Derek knew how to make a lady comfortable. He bought me a lot of things and also took me out to a lot of concerts. Before I met Derek, I forgot that I loved going to parties because of my hectic work schedules. But Derek often advised me to work less and party more. He also said that that's why I employed staff. They are meant to relieve me of my workload. I agreed with him and I left the work for my employees to handle while I went out with him. My husband didn't know about Derek or my secret affairs. At that time, I didn't see the need to tell him because I was just relieving myself from work. And also there was nothing serious going on between Derek and I. Few months after Derek and I started dating, he asked me if we could travel out of town to go see places. He promised to be fun if I agreed to the offer, but I told him to give me time to think about it. I got back from work that very day and met Frederick on the couch watching TV. We exchanged our greetings and I headed to the bathroom to change. I came down after a couple of minutes and went to eat dinner. After I had my dinner, I was about to go up when Frederick called me and told me he wanted to discuss something with me. I nodded and sat down and asked him what it was. He looked at me and asked me if everything was okay and if there was anything I'm hiding from him. I was confused at that moment because I didn't understand what he meant by that. I told him that everything was okay, and he didn't stress further. I tried asking him why, but he said he was done talking to me. I got annoyed with the way he responded, and I told him immediately. Before I could understand what was going on, Frederick had fumed up. He yelled at me and told me to leave. I left angrily and went to bed. A few minutes later, I was over what had transpired between me and my husband. The thought of Derek came to my mind, and I felt happy again. I slept off thinking about him. The next morning, I made up my mind that I was going to the trip Derek offered me. I told my husband that I was having a business out of town, and I would be back in 3 days. He agreed, and I left for Derek's house. I didn't pack much, so it won't be suspicious. I went to his house and we were set to move, but he got a call from someone. I didn't know who it was, and I didn't bother asking him. A few minutes later, he walked up to me and told me that something had happened. I asked him what it was, but he didn't leave much details. He told me that he needed some money to sort out some things. He asked me if I can lend him some amount of money, and he promised to pay me back as soon as he gets the money. I agreed because I knew that he was capable of paying me back, and again, that was his first time asking me for money. So, I told him to give me an hour to arrange for it. Our trip was canceled, and I headed back to my store. I felt disappointed because I wanted to hang out with Derek outside our town. I went to my office and did some calculations and called Derek to send his details. A few minutes later, I wired him the money. He called and thanked me. I started sorting out a few orders and got to work with my employees. A few days later, I called Derek to hear from him. I haven't heard anything from him since the last time I wired him the money. I wanted to know if everything was okay with him. He picked up the phone and I asked if everything was okay. He said yes and would come see me in a couple of minutes. After getting off the phone with him, my husband walked into my store. I wasn't expecting him because it had been a while since he came to see me at the store. Frederick walked in looking sad. I asked him what happened, and he told him that there was an emergency at his workplace and he needed some money. He explained that someone tampered with the figures at his office and he's at the verge of losing his work. I felt sad for him, and at the same time I was helpless because it hadn't been long since I gave Derek money. I didn't tell my husband because he would be very angry with me. So I made a few arrangements to help my husband out because I didn't want him to lose his job. I was able to come up with something, and I gave my husband the money. I told him to keep me updated with things at his office. He left immediately, and he called me to tell me that he would get back to me soon. Not long after my husband left, Derek came. I asked him about what had happened a few days ago, but he looked like someone that wasn't in trouble. He told me that I shouldn't worry about my money, that he would pay back in a couple of days. I didn't think twice about it because I knew that Derek would pay me back. So guys, after Derek left my store, I made arrangements to close the store. It was 5 p.m. that day, and I wanted to get back home early to know more about what went wrong in Frederick's workplace. I drove home and opened the door. Immediately, I entered the house and noticed a piece of paper on the center table. I didn't pay attention to it because I thought maybe it was my husband that had left it there. I went upstairs and freshened up. I went downstairs after a few minutes to call Frederick. I kept on calling him, but no response. I sent him a text message to know if everything was okay, but he didn't respond to any of my texts or calls. I went to the kitchen and prepared something for myself because I was very hungry at that time. I finished eating and decided to go watch some movies. I saw the white piece of paper and I thought of opening the paper to see what it was. Guess what, guys? It was not just an ordinary piece of paper, guys. It was a divorce papers. Update. So guys, Frederick served me divorce papers. He signed the papers, folded it, and placed it on the place I would be able to see it. Attached to the divorce papers, there was a written note from my husband. In the notes, Frederick stated that he knew about my infidelity and acted like he was ignorant about it. Not only that, guys, my husband also said that he knew Derek. They both worked at the same place. They teamed up together to scam me of my money since I decided to play them both and also with their emotions. My husband also wrote in the letter that I shouldn't bother calling him or even looking for him because he had signed the divorce papers and left the town with the money he and Derek scammed me of. I was reading the letter and didn't notice when I fell on my knees. I cried bitterly. My husband had taken the worst revenge on me. My life had been ruined because of that revenge. The money I gave both my husband and Derek was from my business. I didn't know what to do. I tried calling both their lines, but it was not reachable. I went throughout that night. Update. Guys, it's been a month since my husband got divorced. All means to reach out to him were in vain. I discovered that he had blocked my lines and also blocked me on all social media platforms. Apparently I got to know that Derek and my husband were co-workers. It was a few days ago that my husband told me all about what happened. Derek was recently transferred to my husband's workplace a few months ago. The time Derek and I were getting to know each other, he only told me that he had recently moved in because of work. I didn't bother to ask him the type of work he was doing. On the other hand, my husband had seen Derek coming to see me at my store a couple of times, and he decided to follow us to all the places we went to together. He called Derek and told him that he was going out with his wife. Derek didn't know that I was married because I kept it away from him. He was so angry and brought up the idea of scamming me. I don't know what to do right now. My business is crumbling. All the customers that ordered for designs are requesting for a refund because I haven't been able to meet their demands. I'm currently owing a huge amount of money because I've used all the money I had. I have sold most of my things and it seems like the figures keep adding up. I tried calling Derek, but he had already blocked my lines. He didn't return the money I gave him, and my husband is not even planning to see me. I have made a very big mistake by cheating on my husband with a total stranger. Derek scammed me and ran away with my money. I really messed up. This is my story, guys. Goodbye.